Yeah, if you're
Yeah, it's lots
involved
of
in
content.
design
Yeah.
build work and you're working the design side, you've got to put a cost-effective design in place. I mean, that is the assumption from the very beginning. It's got to happen.
But I have hope, for the industry where it's a more design-based, problem-solving kind of process rather than, here's my system, take it or leave it.
Well, here we go. And we got a very popular guest back on. And I gave him the liberty of bringing on his most anticipated guest that he would like to have on. So maybe I know the two of you are colleagues, but I don't want to presume everybody knows. So maybe you two can share a little bit of the context where you have collaborated and how the relationship has grown.
Yeah, well, I hired Sanjeev as a kid, right out of USC School of Architecture Building Science program. And right as he graduated, I had my company ASI Advanced Structures Incorporated going, and I was sort of guest lecturing over there. I wasn't involved as a student. That happened later, right? But I was guest lecturing and that kind of thing. And the main reason was I was bird dogging the exceptional students so I could hire them for my company. And Sanjeev was one of those students. There were quite a few of them, and they're still around. They're still out there, right?
Yeah.
We know them, but Sanjeev was one of the very first, and we worked together for a long time in ASI, and we've continued to work together since then. And more recently, we've been collaborating on re-engaging with the university in sort of more of a giving back kind of a scenario where we put some facades courses together, which we determined were badly needed, and we've collaborated on that and successfully managed to get 3 courses accepted by the faculty and put into the program. They're elective courses, but we've also, and it's sort of when you're dealing with an institution like USC, it sort of takes, it's sort of like an act of God or something like that to get something like this to happen. We did manage to do that, and we actually managed to also get those built into a certificate program. So the Masters of Architecture and Masters of Building Science students can actually also get a certificate in facades technology as well. So that's kind of what we've been doing. We've been having a really good time doing it. It's really fun to engage with these, with these kids. I don't know, Sanjeev, what do you got to say about it?
Yeah, I mean, I've known Mick 30 plus years, right from school. And the relationships developed over time to where, as you said, sort of we're back in the giving back game, right? Going back to USC, Mick has been teaching there a long time, and he, like, maybe 5-10 years ago, he started inviting me to his lectures, and then it's been 4 years now almost. We've been teaching. We got these programs approved. When I got out of school, facades education wasn't really a thing, right? I mean, facade consulting wasn't a thing, right? Architects did what they did, and the contractors built what they built, and sort of we kind of backed into this game, right? Of what is facade education, and it's grown. The understanding has grown over the years, and even as we teach it now, Mick, right? We continuously kind of have this conversation of what do we teach? What's the message that we need to give the students, because it's constantly evolving, right? It's such a new field, and it's so vast. So, yeah, the program at the building science program at USC has sort of given us the opportunity to have these conversations and sort of introduce the whole world of facades to students. We are looking at trying to expand that, hopefully to the undergrads, because it's mostly for grad students at this point, which kind of limits the overall sort of outreach. We do have a 400 level class, which is good for undergrads, but what is architectural education, right? I mean, so you could ask that question, like going back, and I'm an architect, and sort of how much education do you get as a young architect going into the industry, right? And we're trying to enhance that. You don't really, it's sort of, in my mind, it's such a short time that you have with these kids, right? And a lot of programs maybe have only one facades class, right, in their whole sort of educational toolbox. And so, how much do you expose them to? How much can you expose them to in 3 months, right? Or 4 months? So that's always going to be a challenge. So we want to expand that. But yeah, these three programs I think are a great start. We try and sort of what's the word, make indoctrinate them and make them facade geeks, right? As within those 3 months that we have them, and some of them come back and take the second and the third course, and those are the guys who are enlightened, and But even if you have them for 3 months, that's great, right? And it's been very, very rewarding to see these guys going out into the industry, and they're now, the last 4 years we have a lot of young professionals out there in the local industry that have gone through our courses, and I think are better for it. And I think if you ask them, they'll say the same.
Yeah,
That's what I was going to ask. How much of the curriculum do you foresee as being evergreen versus how often are you updating based on new industry trends and things changing?
Yeah, I mean, I can take that, Mick. I mean, I think we are constantly evolving, right? And a big part of our courses and our layout is inviting professionals from the field to talk to the students, right? I'd say we have at least 5 or 6 lectures from industry experts, right? And to talk about the trends and what they're seeing, and sort of how this industry is evolving, where do they see it going? So I'm sure a lot of your guests have also been in our classroom, and sort of that's a big part of bringing this conversation back to the students, right? To say it's not just, oh, here's the curtain wall 101. I think that's the start, but it's really about where are we going? What do you need to sort of know going into the industry for the next 10, 20 years, right? And I mean, we see the students as our champions, right? To say, hey, we have a philosophy that we think can maybe resolve uh, this trouble that we're in with the environment. Sort of that's a big message, right? And they are actually on it. I mean, they are very engaged in that conversation, and they feel that sort of having that conversation is actually advantageous to their education, and that's what I've felt. What do you think, Mick?
Yeah, I mean,
It
it's
sort of hits
difficult.
a chord every time. Yeah.
It's challenging because it's so big, right? I mean, the facade technology area. I mean, really, there really is nothing in architecture that combines attributes of both aesthetics and appearance,
Mhm.
both aesthetics and performance, like the building skin, right? So, and the aesthetics is one thing, the performance thing, there's so many different aspects of it. Everything in architecture ties, it's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Everything in architecture ties back to the facade system. Actually, not just architecture, urban habitat ties back to the building facade system in like 2 degrees, and so it's of critical importance. But there are so many considerations when you start considering the facade. Like facade design is about balancing all of these different considerations that are often conflicting with each other. And these kids, basically, the architecture students are getting little to no education in this at all. We're really, I mean, it would be very easy to, and it would be much more fun and much more complete to put together a whole graduate level program just in facades, right? And they do have such programs in Europe. We have none in the US. And, we just, some of our facade tectonics people, led by Ayla Aksamija, who was at the time the chair of our education committee, put together a report. They did some survey work and collected syllabi and did some analysis and put together a report on the state of facade education. And it was pretty alarming, what they found. I mean, there really is not much going on. And, our experience, Sanjeev and myself, we saw graduate students in architecture graduating that really couldn't differentiate between insulated and laminated glass, if you can imagine that, Adrian, but that's the reality, right? Their materials and processes education is not great, in my opinion, at any level. But when it comes to the facade system, where these considerations of materials and processes are so critical, it's really bad. So, one of the things that we do is we have a big focus on materials and processes. What materials are used, and that's super relevant now because one of the major trends for years now has been this sort of explosion in the palette of materials and processes that are used in the building skin. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was like all glass and aluminum. Now it's, there's all kinds of materials from, fiber reinforced concrete to FRP to, there's rain screens, different kinds of systems. And, it's a really, really a deep, interesting field to get into. And I think that one of the things about the educational process, our experience is that with these kids is that learning about the facade system is very empowering for them, right? It gives them a lot of confidence going out, and what they bring, I think what they include in their portfolio, like being able to represent a detail of a facade assembly or a facade system to in an interview with a potential employer, really differentiates them from all of the other architecture graduates that are out there trying to get a job. So it really has been a great experience doing this.
I would imagine the recruiting process or prospects would be incredible. The biggest unitizers, everybody would be going right to the school looking for the best talent. But do you think, my background is in engineering, do you think a facade program, call it, would be better suited or more appropriate in the architecture school or engineering school?
That's a great question. And, one of the things that I think is really interesting. So, Sanjeev and I have both operated on an international level. We've been exposed to, both European and Asian systems. And one of the really remarkable differences is, this whole notion of facade design and facade engineering. And I use those terms, sort of colloquially, like facade engineering is what is used in Europe. And it was, I think it came from engineers. I think engineers started doing, the facade work in Europe. In the US, it was architects that did that. All of the early facade designers, like the Phil Bonsons of the world, Bob Heinches, architect, and Bob Heinches, by the way, also is one of the, in the absence of any kind of facade education going on, Bob Heinches with Heinches and Associates has been one of the major educators of the people out there now in the industry that understand facade systems and are doing this kind of design work. So, there is that cultural difference. And I don't think in North America, there's any advantage in pushing the thing into I think what needs to happen is that the architecture schools need to embrace more actively the engineering component there, right? The analysis, that goes on, the simulation work, these kind of more technical performance things need to be included, in that course of study. But there's also this aesthetic component too, right? And, design is a big part of it. And I think that's, we don't neglect that either, right? I mean, we're striving for beauty in everything that we do. That's critically important, especially when it comes to things like durability and sustainability. What endures is what is beautiful, right? And yeah.
Yeah, I have a similar take, but maybe a little bit more nuanced in terms of, I think the engineering side of facades where it stands now is more on the specialty structures side, right? Cables, rods, glass panes, that kind of thing. Whereas the design side tends to end up, on the curtain wall, rain screen systems, sort of palette, right? No one is teaching specialty structures out there, right? There are firms out there who do it, TT, Arab, Apple, etc. But anyone sort of, even architects are scared of that, right? So do you end up teaching that even in engineering school? Is it really going to have, is it going to feed into engineers that do that kind of work, or do you just pick it up in the field? I was an architect, I went to building science. Professor Guth Shirley was, sort of a membranes specialist who had worked with Fry Otto. He was an architect, right? But we did engineering in school, right? In India, we had 8 semesters of structures. General understanding of engineering was a little bit more than what we have here in the US. They had maybe 2 semesters of structures. So I think there's a debate there, should it be in architecture, should it be in engineering? My personal sort of bent is it should be part of architecture. And then you overlay the structural aspects of it to try and see if certain people have that bent in terms of, yeah, I like the structural side of it, then I can do a little bit more, right? Maybe someone like me, right? I'm an architect, but I have an engineering understanding and sort of love of it, right? So I sort of naturally tended to seek out opportunities where I could do sort of structural facades, right? As opposed to just doing the range screen sort of calculation side of things. Then there's the whole debate of analytics, right? The performance side, and
Yeah, I mean, think
which,
about everything when it comes
yeah,
to material properties and
exactly.
fasteners and heat transfer and
Yep.
moment of inertia and analyzing the assessment of a beam and just all these things that come into. I would think more engineers gravitate towards the construction and the subcontracting side, where architects gravitate towards the design community.
Yeah, I think we have one or two engineers in our program over the years, and I think we have one now. But it's rare, yeah, for the engineering guys to come across and say, yeah, we want to learn about facades because we think it's an engineering field. Um, I'd be curious to know how the Europeans sort of recruit from the schools, right, in terms of the engineering side of things. But,
Well, I mean, Spencer, you probably know better than I do. He's an architect by trade, and he went to facade engineering school or facade school in Germany, but he has an incredible structural understanding, even with an architectural background, which really surprised me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's like you have engineers out there. I mean, there's a diversity of engineers too. When you talk about engineering, it's not one thing. You've got design engineers out there. That's the way I've always thought about it. That are really some of the greatest designers we've ever had have been,
yeah.
engineers. But a lot of engineers, probably in my experience anyway, the majority of engineers are basically number crunchers, and they don't really have a good understanding of structure, right? From the standpoint of stability and a feel for structure, right? And it's kind of the same with building science too, right? You can have building scientists that understand how to run the simulation programs and do the software programs, but they don't have a good feel for like how thermal transfer works, that kind of thing. So it's, I think what the most important thing is, wherever you get that education, is to really develop that experiential feel for what it's about.
Yeah, there's an interesting way to look at it, Mick. We have these three courses, right? Our 472, 572, and 672. So 472 is sort of, a very simple 2-unit course, which really talks about an introduction to materials and processes of materials within facades. 572 is about performance, right? And performance can mean many things, right? Including structural performance, thermal performance, environmental performance. And then 672 is meant to be an advanced design studio, talk about, design and performance together, right? And sort of trying to link all the basics of facade design into a process, right? And get a result. So, we've taught 672 for about 3 years now. We've taught 572 for about 4 years now. It's interesting because in 672, we almost sort of give them a design problem, right? To say, here's the design problem, design something, and we'll back into how you sort of evaluate performance and structure and everything else. And that's when you see some of the students kind of coming up with, structural ideas of what design can be, or aesthetic ideas, or some kind of materiality that they want to pursue, and sort of that sort of start shifting their bent, right, towards, hey, like there was one student who wanted to do space frames, right, and sort of the jury came in and said, this is a facades class, why are you designing a space frame, right? But that's okay, right, because that's sort of part of the overall discourse of facade. So whereas 572, which we just finished, sort of our fourth year of 572, is really about performance. You're teaching them how to think about all these different issues, and it's incredibly difficult to kind of narrow that down into like a 16-week, say these are all the things that you need to think about, come up with something that's addresses everything, right? So it's an interesting sort of direction that you come from, where you could say, hey, one semester we're just going to talk about engineering and let's see what happens, right? And invite guests from these firms who have facade engineers to sort of give their take on it. I think the nice part about sort of USC Building Science is that it allows us the sort of breadth to explore and think about things the way we think it should be or is going to be in the field, and sort of expose the students to that. That's always been the strength of the program, even for the building science students who are there. You pick your course, right, of inquiry, and kind of start sort of chipping away at it to see where the way it leads you, right? So some of us, I mean, some of it for us, Mick, has been a discovery, right? To say, what should it be? And to go back to your earlier question, there is no right or wrong answer, right? I mean, everyone you ask, I'm sure, even people like Isla and others, will give you a different opinion of what facade education is, right? And what it should be. But in my view, I wish we had more courses for the undergrads. Maybe sort of in their studios, they should be teaching something about a unit of facades in every studio almost, right? So they at least think about it. I don't know how much they would come out knowing about facades, but at least, the seed has been planted, right? That's sort of the basic idea, I think.
That'd make a huge difference for us because,
Yeah.
most of the students that come in and this is a graduate level courses, the 572 and 672, most of them come in, you got to start at square one. You got to start at the basics. Like I said, they really don't. I mean, glass is a ubiquitous material in architecture, right? And they really don't know anything about glass. And that's just one of the materials, right? So, what is a facade assembly? What's the assembly about? How do you evaluate the durability, the performance of this assembly? There's a whole lot to talk about. And we can only I would love, it would be such a luxury to put together a whole degree program, starting with the undergraduate students, with a couple of core classes in facade, so they get all the basics before they ever hit the graduate level. And then you could really go to town.
Yeah, I mean, how did the two of you think about, I know you still have industry involvement, but think about staying fresh for the students and staying up to date. I mean, I know there are professors out there who begin down that track and don't have any real true industry involvement for 10, 15, 20 years. So how do you stay in touch with what's still going on?
Well, Sanjeev is out there doing it, right?
Yeah,
He's got his own consultancy and he's involved in a lot of projects. For me, I got to watch out, right? Because I'm not doing that like I was a few years back. But because of the role I play for the Facade Tectonics Institute, I get exposed to a lot of people that are doing a lot of different things. And then the big thing that we can do is, because we're old guys, especially me. I've been around forever, so I know between the two of us, we know a lot of people in the industry, and we pull them in, and they're happy to do it. And I'm talking about really interesting, really senior level people that come and give guest lectures, either virtually or in person to these students. And that's huge, right? And that's oftentimes about current projects. It's as well as sort of the fundamentals, and it ranges from everything from highly technical stuff to equity considerations in facade systems. So, I mean, how interesting is that? It's really, really fun.
I think back to, I started my career on the consulting side, and I didn't know what I was getting into. And it's really the type of learn while you're on the job track. And it was invaluable experience. But I remember you kind of get assigned a certain segment within the industry when you start, but you can go anywhere from existing to new build. And then within that, everything from become a curtain wall expert, window wall, hand-laid brick, rain screen, mega panel, precast, all these different sort of options. There were glass experts. So it's almost like in this industry, I mean, you can't be a jack of all trades. You can't really make a true impact. You could spend an entire career focusing on one segment.
Mm-hmm.
Easily.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like Mick said, right? I'm a consultant, but I work for a contractor, right? And when I work with ASI, we kind of explored finding solutions to questions that hadn't been answered, right? I think every one of our projects was like that, Mick, at least the majority of it, which kind of teaches you a way to think about things and a way to research questions that you have to ask, because fundamentally you have to come up with the right answer. Otherwise, you get a failure, right? And whether that's structural or performance or whatever, right? Installation, etc., right? So sort of going through the process and learning that. I mean, I would say everyone should work for a contractor for a couple of years, right? just to get your basics, right? I mean, or even in school, if we could have, workshops that they actually build something, uh, knowing what a screw feels like, or knowing what a 12 by 12 by 1 inch base plate, how much it weighs, right? It's easy to draw, right? Yeah, half inch, 1 inch, but when you actually, yeah, that thing is, 200 pounds, right? I mean, how are you going to lift it into place? The sort of little questions like that, sort of that practical experience, if we could bring that into education, it would be awesome, right? To say, okay, we're going to give 1 semester of going on and working with the contractor or the shadow, right? To say, I mean, I guess they have internships for that, but and some programs do, right? Like Waterloo, I think, has this internship program, and those kids are incredibly grounded when they come out, right? Slow, right? I think it's a similar program, right? And everyone that I've sort of come across in the industry that are from these schools are grounded like crazy because they've been through that practical experience and have sort of found their groove because of it, right? They kind of you learn to ask the right questions. Let's put it that way. In the philosophical classroom environment, it's always tough to sort of tell the kids what question to ask if they're not tuned to it, right? So that's a challenge, right? So maybe I don't know, Mick. We can try and build something in one of the semesters.
Yeah,
But
that's one of the frustrating things. We don't have a lab. I mean,
yeah,
ideally, we would love to have those kind of facilities so it was easier for the students to build stuff. I mean, they have access to some level of printers and that kind of thing. So we do make them get into some level of model making, but it doesn't get there's no real opportunity to get very sophisticated at that level, like building full scale prototypes. And we take them down to Smith Emery and show them, the assemblies that are being tested, and that kind of thing. That's one of the favorite field trips that we do. Um, but I mean, Sanjeev and I, we grew up. ASI was a design build company, right? So we had to build what we designed.
yeah,
So in that sense, we were, our early career, and most of my career was on the contracting side, right? So, but it was the design build stuff too, always involved in the design, which is a tremendous educational experience when you have to build every little, you know, every little line that you put into the computer or put on paper, when it has to be, fabricated and assembled on a building site. That level of information gets built into your design, and that's what we try to teach the kids too. Look, you got to think about,
yeah,
how this thing is going to be fabricated, how it's going to be installed. You got to tell us that, when you
Well,
do.
also learning how to think on your feet because you don't have all the time in the world. Think about you ship a unit
yeah,
to site and then it doesn't reach the embed or it's not within tolerance. You got to move because you got a GC up your neck.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
could you imagine you were in a curriculum and you can only imagine you had an internship, a 2 month internship in a curtain wall production plant, and then a 2 month internship on site, and then a 2 month internship seeing the design assist process. I mean, that student would come out an animal. Everybody would
yeah,
want to hire him or her.
well, I mean,
yeah,
that's what because the the educational system is not providing graduate students that are capable of doing this. Most of the advanced curtain wall companies have their own educational programs, right? Like Enclose has Enclose U, and they take their project managers and put them through, you know, just like what you're talking about, Adrian. It's like 6 months in the factory, 6 months in the engineering department. They make them go through this program. And when I was working there, the bar was basically a 5-year investment before you became a project manager. And at that point, you were like your own entrepreneur. You were given full, P&L responsibility, everything. You were the decision maker for those jobs. So, that kind of a training program is, I mean, you can't beat that.
yeah. And we do try and get sort of subcontractors to come and talk to the students too, and they'll come in and even sort of sit in class and try and see if there are students there who are interested to join them as internships and things. So the class is open to everyone in the industry, right? We try and invite professionals, designers, engineers, contractors to come and sort of give their point of view, right? It's really an exchange of point of views so that the students get exposed to all of these things. And what is the success rate? I guess out of a class of 20 or 30 students, if you can sort of light the fire under two or three, that's great, right? You've sort of created 2, 3 new facade geeks that'll take it to the next level, right? And there are, I mean, and you see it, right? Some of them just, the light goes on and they're like, whoa, I just love this. And this is what I'm going to do with my career. I mean, I have 2 of my ex-students working for me now, right? So similarly, and they say, we want to be a facade sort of expert, and this is our career, and we didn't have that opportunity, but I'm glad that these kids do, right? So yeah.
And you sort of have to balance the practical part of the education with the more creative aspect of it too, right? I mean, the university is a unique environment for exploring ideas, right? So we definitely want to let them do that. But like Sanjeev said, there's a lot of different viewpoints, right? So we had in this review that we just had a couple of weeks ago for the end of this semester, Joe Curry, who is ALT facade consulting company, very active primarily in Asia, but he was in the jury when the students did their final presentations. And so the kids, we let them go, man. And they explore ideas, and they do some pretty wild things. And we sort of focus on making them think through how they're going to make that work, right? But Joe's thing, looking at this stuff, was, oh my God, that's going to cost so much. Every one of them was like, oh man, that is going to cost so much. That was just, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a challenge we have even in the industry, right? You go and sit with your design partner who's going to hire you as a facade consultant, and the first question is, how much is it going to cost? Maybe we should talk about cost in one of our classes. So as a student, I don't know if you really want to sort of bracket them into the cost aspect of it.
Well, they're going to get that
the rest of your life. You're going to get it, right? So let them explore.
First job, they're going to get a heavy dose of that orientation. Right?
Can't do that.
That's the reality. I got a call from a contractor this morning. He said, what happened? All of a sudden now everything's going non-union and every project is budget based. And I said, I've been telling you this is coming. And so some markets come later than others, but that's the reality of our industry. And if you're not prepared for that, to think through whether you're on the contracting side or the consulting side, to be able to advise your clients or owners. I mean, how many instances have you been collaborating or talking to an architect, and then they got the budget and they were totally surprised, and you thought to yourself, did you not know what you were drawing, or did you not ask for budget feedback? And often they say, well, it's on the CM or the GC's responsibility to put together a budget. But I would think all that time and energy put into piecing together a schematic or design development set, you'd want to know if it's going to be in line or if it can be built.
Yeah. If you're involved in design build work and you're working the design side, you've got to put a cost-effective design in place. I mean, that is the assumption from the very beginning. It's got to happen.
I'm sure you have a podcast on this topic already, Adrian.
Many.
How do you control costs from concept all the way through construction, right? I mean, and it's a great topic to talk about, even in each stage of the project, because I mean, I guess that's what exploring ideas is about, right? And maybe there's a studio in there that students explore ideas of design and how it relates to budgets and costs. Sort of link them up with a contractor and have them work with them to see if they can give them a budget. Say, yeah, try and design a facade for a certain amount of money, right? See what
ultimately it's about. How do you get everybody's interests aligned between the architect and the sub and the GC and the owner? There's usually one opposing party that I still haven't found a way to overcome this hurdle, but often the general contractor has an incentive or a motive to crunch together the numbers or present it a certain way to the owner. And there's a careful dance you have to play as a subcontractor, especially if you have a direct owner relationship, because at the end of the day, your client is the GC. And so,
yeah, I mean, for me, that's where the relationships come in with the subs, right? So, we've been in the industry a long time, both Mick and I. I mean, I know a lot of people have developed a lot of close relationships to where you can pick up the phone and say, hey, we're looking at this project, here's the X budget, what can you do, right? Like, where do you think we should go? That's sort of the first question, right, that you ask. So, and then, the GCs have their own relationships with the same people, right? So you kind of work that triangle, and if it's successful, the owner's protected, right? And that's a lot of what I do, right? It's at this stage of my career, it's really about connecting the relationships and sort of working the problem, right? To get the best part of design.
Here's the
Uh,
interesting thing to me, Sanjeev and Adrian, is this confrontation that is we're right at the cutting edge of this confrontation between cost and performance, right? We've got to improve building performance, and the facade system is a huge part of that. At least it's a huge opportunity to do that, right?
Yeah.
And so we've got these escalating code requirements. We've got an advocacy committee at Facade Tectonics that's working really hard to promote these things. And at the same time, like you say, Adrian, the marketplace is getting increasingly cost driven. I mean, it's been that way for a long, long time, but increasingly so. What I'm hoping is that tension, that conflict, is going to break something open. It's going to break what's been going on. I mean,
it's starting to. It's starting to.
Work,
yeah.
I mean, as we know it now, curtain wall is not going to. It's not going to make it. What is going to make it? We have to go through this transformation in order to, realize the kind of performance out of the built environment that we need.
I have hope, because I mean, I have a bunch of projects where, let me put it in a slightly different way, right? I know it's not about facade education here, but we started Design Assist as one of those companies that did true design assist, right? You found a design in a solution to match all the different sort of things that the project needed, including budget, right? It's not the owner's problem, it's not the GC's problem, it was our problem because we wanted to find the best solution. Design assist somewhere along the way got sort of, skewed into this, get me on the project as a subcontractor, I'll design assist my system into your design, and it costs what it costs, right? But I see it's going back. I mean, I see that sort of departure from that now with a bunch of firms that I'm working with, where it's going back to what can we do and develop new systems, hybrid systems, new materials, to get back to that old design assist sort of philosophy to find the best solution for the right cost, right? And it may not be in the material that was initially part of the project, it might be a different solution. And some of it has to do with what Mick said. It's like, the codes and the performance are basically outdating and making the old systems redundant, right? So they have to be new solutions. And I see that happening on a couple of projects. And I think there are a lot of new contractors who are getting into the facade space, as opposed to just the big curtain wall guys, right? Sort of the next level down, the mid-level guys who are, I think, more open to sort of trying new things just to get into the industry, right? And we're seeing that happening. Can have that conversation another day, but I have hope, for the industry where it's a more design-based, problem-solving kind of process rather than, here's my system, take it or leave it, which is, and a lot of it, I think, had to do with the architecture that was coming out as well, right? There were, glassy buildings, curtain wall was the solution, and that was it, right? So whoever could do it more efficiently and cheaper sort of got the job, right? But
what do you guys think? What do you guys think a facade system is going to look like 5 years from now?
Or maybe too short a time.
Maybe 10 years from now.
Yeah,
hey, things are changing fast,
It's funny. I was going to say the trend you spoke about last time is this sort of mega panel approach and as much offsite construction as possible. I'd
say, I wouldn't quite say mega panel. I'd say framing with different systems on it, but completely offsite. I absolutely agree with it. And the type of systems you can put on a backup frame. Now that frame can be many things, right? Even, it could be unitized. I don't know, right? But it's not just a unitized pre-glazed system, right? It's maybe it's a unitized frame with multiple components on it that actually form the basis of the facade. I think that's where it's going. Yeah, I would agree with you. It could be plaster, preformed plaster panels, and I've seen some really beautiful work recently, just in standard plaster, right? It doesn't have to be a flat, ugly wall. Yeah.
Let me flip it in the other direction. Something I wanted to ask the two of you, kind of on a closing note. I'm going to pose a question and then let both of you choose two questions. Which one who wants to answer first, and then which question you want to answer. So, what is either one lesson that you've learned in the past year, or something that you've significantly or drastically changed your mind on? reflecting on the past year, or something, something you were pushing for a long time in your career where you've taken a new stance?
I can go first because I recently had this conversation. It's on a project of mine where we pushed a material for the design for a very long time, and it's a slow building. I can't tell you what the building project, 6-7 years under design and construction, to the eventual solution was a completely different material, but the same design. It was a beautiful sort of insight as to, wow, why didn't we think of that, like to begin with, right? And it happened organically through the process of the project to where it got into trouble and someone had to think outside the box, right? So I'd say for me, sort of, don't go into any sort of problem solving mode with the preconceived notion of what material or system that, might be the right thing. It could evolve into something completely new and different and perfect for the project. That's my approach, I guess. And yeah, we learn something every day, right? I mean, and I'm sure Mick will say the same thing. I'd love to give you the example of what it was, but maybe in a year or two, once the project opens, then we can chat about it. But yeah,
I'm increasingly perceiving myself as sort of a subversive, semi-radicalized designer, right? And I
love that about you, Mick. That's why we formed such a good team.
I have deep frustrations, with the profession and the slowness of change. Our response to the climate change problem is just weak. I mean, and it's not just our profession, right? It's society at large. I just read a Gallup poll, that took place recently, within the past 3 or 4 months, on the concerns that people have in society at large, and there were 20 of them. And at the very bottom is climate change, right? It's like everybody's concerned about immigration. Everybody's concerned about the economy, all things that are going to be devastated by climate change, right?
Right.
And climate change is at the bottom. So, and we know that buildings are a big part of the problem. And we know that facades can be a huge part of the solution of that big part of the problem, right? So, this lack of awareness of this in the industry is very frustrating to me. The slowness in embracing solutions here, and you've heard Helen Sanders has spoken with you previously about the technology that's sitting on shelves, higher performing technology that's not being adopted. These kind of things, very frustrating. So what is satisfying this this great frustration I have is teaching. These kids, they come in, they want to hear about it, and they're going out and they're thinking differently about these problems. And so this becomes sort of a subversive activity for us. If we can seed the profession with these young free thinkers, that can go out and really begin to look for and insist on change, that's where I find my hope these days.
I got to say, I had John Straub on from University of Waterloo a few weeks ago, and I asked him, I was actually thinking about you when I framed the question, how do you kind of, as an industry vet, remain optimistic? And he said the opportunity to still educate these students and make a change in that way. So I'm very glad you have had and continue to have that realization, because I think it's really significant. But thank you both for hopping on. I look forward to doing this again, and Sanjeev, maybe next time we can hear more about the project.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for listening to our ramblings. Yeah, it was fun. Yeah.
Of course.
Always
All right.
fun, Adrian. Thanks.
Later.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Hey,
everyone.
take care, yeah.
Happy holidays.